Yorgos Lanthimos has emerged as one of the most distinct filmmakers of the 21st century. He has a way of making quote-unquote weirdo cinema enjoyable for both cinephiles and casual viewers alike. I've seen almost every one of his films and I've enjoyed all of them too. He started gaining mainstream recognition in the 2010s with films like The Lobster, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, and of course, The Favourite. 5 years later in 2023, he returned with his most successful project yet, Poor Things. I feel a bit strange calling Poor Things an accessible film, but this is the film that cemented his place in the mainstream. Since Poor Things, Yorgos Lanthimos has already put out 2 feature films. One of which is Kinds of Kindness, which I absolutely love, but this seems to be the point where a lot of people got a little bit tired of Yorgos' style. Perhaps this has something to do with the fact that Kinds of Kindness came out not even a year after Poor Things, as well as the fact that the film very much stays in Yorgos' comfort zone. Again, I love Kinds of Kindness, but a lot of people feel indifferent about it. This leads us to Yorgos' latest film, Bugonia. Bugonia comes out about 2 years after Poor Things, which means that Yorgos Lanthimos has released 3 films within 2 years. He may just be making up for lost time, because there was a 5-year gap between The Favourite and Poor Things. However, I must admit that 3 films in 2 years is a lot to digest. I suppose you could call it too much of a good thing. The premise of Bugonia goes as follows. 2 conspiracy-obsessed young men kidnap the high-powered CEO of a major company, convinced that she's an alien intent on destroying planet Earth. It sounds very much like a Yorgos film, which obviously isn't a bad thing because I have enjoyed everything I've seen from him thus far, and I had a great time with Bugonia too. It's classic Yorgos, a beautifully shot film with an eerie score and unnerving dialogue. The story is dark and twisted, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat. The 2 men in the film are Teddy, played by Jesse Plemons, and Don, played by Aiden Delby. I think that's how you pronounce his name, I'm not sure. They're both great in the film, but Teddy is clearly the main guy and Don is the sidekick. I'm a huge Jesse Plemons fan, and whenever he gets a lead role, I get happy. He is the star of this film, and of course Emma Stone is the co-lead and she is amazing too. However, this is the Jesse Plemons show. His character is obviously a lunatic, however you can see how he got there. He's not a mustache-twirling villain. He's just a vulnerable guy who got wronged by society and now is going down a dark path. There are so many people out there like this. Most of them don't go this far, of course, but people like this exist, and they're only becoming more and more common in this digital world that we inhabit. But how about Emma Stone's character, the high-power corporate CEO? Of course her character is somewhat easy to sympathize with given the situation she's in, however she is not a good person. In fact, people like her are one of the main reasons why the world is a miserable place. But then there's the question of whether or not she's actually an alien. Of course I won't spoil it, but the film does do a good job at keeping you guessing. In fact, the film as a whole is very unpredictable. I never had any idea what would happen next, and I think that's a great quality for a film to have. Emma Stone's performance is unsurprisingly great. This is her 4th time collaborating with Yorgos Lanthimos on a feature film. They are cinematic soulmates. Although I must admit that out of the 4 films, her performance in Bugonia is probably my least favourite, but that's not really saying anything because they're all great. From a dialogue standpoint, Bugonia certainly feels more natural and realistic compared to something like The Lobster or The Killing of a Sacred Deer. I'm not saying if it's better or worse, but it's a nice change of pace. I would also go as far as to say that this is probably Yorgos' funniest film, either this or The Lobster. As expected, the comedy is absurd and it had my theatre laughing consistently. From a technical standpoint, the film is practically flawless. The musical score is by Jerskin Fendrix, who also did Poor Things and Kinds of Kindness. He and Yorgos seem to be on the same wavelength, and I hope to see more collaborations in the future. And the visual presentation is sleek with a distinct color palette. I should also mention that Bugonia is an adaptation of another film called Save the Green Planet, which I will be watching eventually but haven't seen yet. As for my issues with Bugonia, I technically don't have many. There's a subplot involving a police officer that feels a bit shoehorned in. I understand why it's in the film, but I could have done without it. I also haven't fully decided on how I feel about the ending of this film, but I won't get into spoilers and I do think I like it overall. But there is one major thing that bugs me about Bugonia, and it doesn't even have much to do with the quality of this film, because as much as I like Bugonia, I feel like I would have loved it if it came out 5 years ago. Simply put, the film feels a bit too safe for Yorgos Lanthimos in this stage of his career. I mentioned how a lot of people were getting Yorgos Lanthimos fatigue with Kinds of Kindness. I was not one of those people, but I fear I might be heading in that direction with Bugonia. I'm not there yet, but with a couple more films like this, I'm afraid I might get there. And it's a conflicting feeling, because I love these films, but I don't think Bugonia offered much that I hadn't seen before. And I feel like I must reiterate, there's no problem yet. However, for Yorgos' next film, I'd like to see him do something different. Perhaps something more grounded like The Favourite. Or maybe he could go even more ambitious like he did with Poor Things. I'm not saying there's no place for a middle-of-the-road Yorgos film like Bugonia. Simply saying that sentence out loud is insane because I really like Bugonia. But considering that Yorgos Lanthimos is in the prime of his career, and I'm assuming has a ton of creative freedom, I wish he would simply go ahead and make his magnum opus because I truly believe he has yet to make his best film. That's how much faith I have in him. I don't know if I'm making a lot of sense right now, but this is how I feel at the moment. Please don't take this as me being negative. I know it probably sounds like I'm complaining about nothing, but what I mean to say is that I don't want to see one of my favorite working filmmakers get too comfortable, if you know what I mean. But no need to worry, we're certainly not at that point yet at least. Bugonia is a great film and I give it an 8 out of 10. I am tremendously excited to see what every single person involved in the making of this film does next. And that's about all I have to say for now. See you next time.